Well, this week we're going to talk about fountain pens. They make such great expressive lines, but how do you use them exactly? How do you fill them? And what's the best kind to buy, especially if you're just starting out or you're on a limited budget? Well, we're going to ask Deborah Basel. She's our resident pen expert. She's a calligrapher who writes for the Bible of pen collecting, Pen World International. She's also a student at Sketchbook School. What is a good fountain pen to use for the first time if you're going to start drawing?
Well, since the world of drawing, the world of an artist seems so much different than writing, um, when I started with sketchbook school, I picked up a couple of these inexpensive Lamy pens. I really like it because you can interchange the nibs fairly quickly. You just pull them off and put them back on. It's very simple. Even a beginner can do it. They're relatively inexpensive. I mean, between $20 and $30, maybe a little more, you can get a really nice pen and it writes beautifully. I bought it to draw with and I found myself writing with it all the time. Inside the Lamy pen, you can either put a cartridge or one of these, which is a converter. And you can see the little piston is pushing. Now, if that had ink, it'd be all over my hand right now. So it's pushing out, and now it's pulling, turning it clockwise, and the ink would be pulling into the pen through the nib. So you can use a cartridge or you can use a converter. Now, some pens have the piston fill inside the pen. So you turn a little knob at the end of the pen and it sucks the ink into the body of the pen.
There's basically two categories of fountain pen, or two different ways in which you put ink in. One is that you buy a pre-made cartridge, that you buy a plastic thing, you buy in a box, and the other is that you have, as you say, a converter, and you use that to fill your pen from a bottle of ink. Now,
Right.
the difference is, why would you want to use a converter instead of using cartridges? They seem a lot cleaner and simpler.
The cartridges are nice for travel, but you never know how long a cartridge has been sitting in a store. So if you buy a cartridge, even though it's a sealed unit, it could be partially evaporated. The other thing is that when you pull the ink through the nib of the pen and actually fill it with a bottle, first of all, it's a lot less expensive. You can use a lot of different colors and a lot of different manufacturers' inks. The other thing is that that when you're refilling that, you're going to refill it fairly often. I fill my Lamy almost every day. And when I refill it, it's also moving the ink over the nib, over the mechanism, and kind of giving it a little bath. So it's always nice to clean out your pens. I would use a little soapy water with a little ammonia in it to clean out my pens on a regular basis. But it also helps if you're filling from a bottle over and over, it helps keep it cleaner.
That's great. And another reason I would think that I've used converters is because I like to draw in my sketchbook and then watercolor over them, and I've never been able to find cartridges that had waterproof ink in them. What other brands would you suggest to somebody who's a first timer?
This is a Pilot Preppy, and this is actually, I want to say maybe a $15 pen. And what you can do, since there is no converter with this pen, what you can do is empty the cartridge and fill it with a syringe. And you can put any kind of ink you want in that converter. The other thing is, if you know somebody who's into pens, they can sometimes put an O-ring right here and seal the body, and then you would fill the whole body of the pen with ink.
Are there any other pens that you would recommend? Just because those two are common, they're available, right? You can buy them on the internet. You can buy them fairly easily, probably at a good stationery store. But what about the next step up? What would be like if you were willing to spend a bit more? What would be your next fountain pen that you would suggest?
Well, the price points are generally determined by the type of nib that you have. So if you have a steel nib, the it's less expensive. Now we're talking under $100. So that would be less expensive. And then if you decide that you want to go into a gold nib, it can go up from there. You can still sometimes find some really nice pens in an antique store. And what happens is that there's a rubber sac inside these older pens that sometimes gets brittle and doesn't work. But it's a really simple matter to find someone knowledgeable in pens to get them to fix it for you, and relatively inexpensive.
People do a lot of kind of custom conversions of fountain pens, right? People are always
Right.
kind of monkeying around with them and adapting them.
There's a fountain pen network um, online, and I'll give you the website for that. It's actually www.fountainpennetwork.com. I did a search on some of the document inks and the waterproof inks, and everybody's discussing them. People have done tests with them to see which are the most waterproof and which work the best, and that sort of thing. And pen shows. There are a lot of pen shows all over the United States. If you do a Google search on Susan Wirth, Wirth, and then once you get to her site, if you click on Susie's Pen Show calendar, you can track down a show in your area, and there's always people who work on pens there. They're usually very reputable.
And why, besides because it's pretty, why would you get a gold nib instead of a steel nib? What's the advantage of it?
The gold nibs tend to be a little bit smoother, but although that's not always the case. And they're sometimes a little bit more flexible, although that's not always the case either.
Well, great. Well, thanks very much. That's a really good introduction. I've used the Lamy Safari myself. I have several of them, and I think that they're a great pen. I haven't really had any reason to go beyond them, but I've always had a hankering for kind of a custom-made gold nib, super flexible fountain pen. But one day, who knows? Thank you very much, Deborah. You know so much about pens, and it's really great to be able to pick your brain about it. Thanks again for your help today.
Oh, you're welcome.